I'll start with some introductions just from our side before we go into the webinar. I know some of you. My name is Rhiannon, and I've been working with Skateistan since 2010. I started in Afghanistan as a volunteer, and then ended up staying as a staff member and was working in Afghanistan, a little bit in Cambodia over 5 years. I worked mostly in communications and fundraising, but I also was involved in programs and HR and sometimes even finance if there was no one else there to do it. So that was a really good experience for me. And then I worked at another nonprofit for 3 years, and I recently rejoined Skateistan last year to launch our Goodpush Alliance project, which is a knowledge sharing network for social skateboarding projects. And yeah, this is our first webinar, so
yeah.
Excited, and this is Imran.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm very excited. My name is Imran. I have been working in the non-profit sector for last 9 to 10 years. I was country director for Seeds of Peace in Pakistan, and I was working with young people, especially from countries like Afghanistan, India, and Pakistan. For the last 9 months with Skateistan, I not only enjoying so much myself to be here, but also to see a lot of patient people around us, and I'm focused on making Skateistan a child-safe organization. So already there was a lot of talking about child protection was going on, but when I came, I introduced a new policy and I trained a lot of staff members, and I'm very excited to share my experiences with all of you and learn from you at the same time. Today we will mostly focus on when we talk about like child-safe organization, we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about raising awareness in child protection, especially when people are working directly and indirectly with children. Rhiannon will touch upon what are the risk areas within social skate projects, basically working on a grassroots level, and how we can make space much more child-friendly. And also, what would be the next steps? What are the actions which we'll take when we talk about making our initiatives child-friendly? So these are pretty much our expectations and goals for today's webinar. And I think at the end we'll also ask all of you that what else you could want us to see in the next coming webinars. Today, I think child protection itself is a wide range of topic. It's in 1 hour. It's like it would be a lot of work to explain everything. But what we'll do is today we just wanted to touch upon the structures on how to make our skate projects more, safe for the children. So for that, the first step is to talk about child protection. The basic thing when I joined Skateistan, what we also observed that many people really wanted to report and respond to certain abuses within the organization, but they don't know how to record it and what is the whole process. So we will quickly go through that as well, and then we'll talk about the safety, physical safety on the skate projects, and then Rhiannon will also talk about what actions are needed, how will we take actions, and at the end we'll have some question and answers. Before we go into the introduction of child protection, I really wanted to talk about certain steps of making an organization child safe. When we talk a lot about Skateistan, we're talking a lot about culture of safety, culture of awareness. So to reach that culture of safety and to reach that culture of awareness, there are certain steps which we follow. And I think what I also have gone through the profiles of all of you, I also saw that some of you are in the middle of these stages. Some of you have child protection policies, some of you are really committed to have a child protection policies, and some of you are talking about child protection issues and abuses within the skate projects you have. So I think the first stage is the same. It's like introduction to child protection, which we are doing today. It's that you start talking about that there are certain issues. What research has suggested and what research has also, what I have, like a big research by Child Hope and UNICEF, is that many organizations who are in direct contact with children, they don't recognize, they just say we are good people, this is a good community. There are no child abuses happening, especially with us. We are very good people. So I think I congratulate all of you that you're there and you really wanted to talk about child protection issues and especially child abuses. So that's stage one. And many of us who are joining, we are at stage one. We really want to talk about it and we wanted to lay down the foundation. Then stage two is the necessary foundation for it. So the commitment from the management, the commitment from the skate park, the commitment from all of us, that we have a better understanding of child protection issues. We have a good foundation based on our policy. So then this lead us to stage three, where organizations and skate projects have their own child protection policies and procedures in place. And then stage four is that when you implement these child protection policies and procedures within your skate park. Stage five is that you deal with a lot of obstacles. There are a lot of.
Sorry, let me stop this. My mistake.
Sorry, no. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. There are international treaties which we'll talk about in my next slides, but there is also obstacles locally in the communities where you work. When I was training a lot of people in our skate parks as well, the understanding of child protection in Afghanistan and the understanding of child protection and its implementation in Cambodia is entirely different. So if you make great policies, you have great documents in place, but if they are not locally embedded and they're not locally understood, they're not up to the local understanding, you'll face a lot of obstacles. But obstacles are also part of this whole process because child protection itself is a very sensitive issue. So when we talk about child protection, there will be a lot of sensitivity coming around it. So I think there will be, stage 5 will be obstacles and how to deal with these obstacles. And the last stage of the child protection policy is monitoring and evolution, that how you monitor your policy, how you revisit, because for the most part of it, also research suggests that for the most part of it, many organizations, they have their policy, they make it in place, they don't go back, there is no training involved. When people talk to them, that do you have a child protection policy? They say, yeah, we have a child protection policy. But most organizations' child protection policies are very, very old. And I think monitoring and evolution is very important. Going back, having staff training, making child protection part of the recruitment, it's very, very important aspect of child protection policy. Also, to make your organization or your skate project child safe. Actually, child protection is it's a term recently used. It's a broad term to use for philosophies, policy, standard guidelines, and procedure to protect children from intentional and unintentional harm. Intentional harm, I'll talk about it, and unintentional harm, Rhiannon will talk about later in her slides. But intentional harms are the harms which could potentially, which could you could see it. It is coming from the community. It's coming from abuses. It could be like self-harm. Many children have a lot of communities, many kids go through a lot of trauma. They go through a lot of, so they have suicidal thoughts. They wanted to potentially intentionally harm themselves. Then also there's like a peer abuse. Intentionally, one pair is bullying other pairs. So these are the intentional harm. So then we also talk about what we actually are protecting children from. There are certain child protection issues within the community, and there are certain child protection issues within our skate parks where our programs are. What today we are talking about, we don't have the capacity to go to the community and to talk about the larger child protection issues. If we can help the larger child protection issues within the community, that's good. But right now we're just talking about the child protection within our programs. So that could be physical abuse, that could be sexual abuse, that could be emotional or psychological abuse, and also neglect. Also, these abuses could come from the community to the skate park, but we have to vigilant, and we should see these abuses within our skate projects. Then what is then child protection policy? It's a commitment to safeguard children from harm, which makes where we can see all these abuses happening, and we have a commitment to safeguard, to prevent these abuses happening in our programs. Why we need a policy? Because many organizations also talk about it, that we don't need a policy. We can just talk about child protection, but we don't need a policy. What a policy can do is it provides a framework for us. It provides a framework for principles, standards, and guidelines. And these are the guidelines which really helps us to proceed further, to become champion of child safety in our initiatives. Also, child protection policy also it's a moral and a legal responsibility to protect children. Also, if many of you must have heard the UN Convention on the Rights of Children. I have had the link here, so I will go here. So most of you who are coming from these countries, the government have signed treaties that they will make sure that all the children are protected, and the government and the initiatives who are directly or indirectly in connection to children, they will make sure that the children are protected. So I will encourage all of you to go through this UN convention. It's very brief. It gives a lot of information, but this is just a legal framework which we can use. Based on this UN convention, many countries have their own local laws. So I think it's also when we talk about to create child safe organization, it also is important that we also know that what local laws are in our own countries. Then when we talk about child protection policy, it helps us. The policy helps us to build a culture of awareness. So what happens is most often in programs and initiatives, many people and many organizations, they really say everyone working with us knows about child protection. They see some child abuse is happening, but they don't recognize it. They don't recognize the signs. So there is a lack of awareness within the initiatives, within the programs where there's a lot of children coming. That's why there's a lot of abuses happening. So what child protection policy does, it creates a culture of awareness. That you become aware of the issues, you become more vigilant, and you see and you talk to your colleagues if something is happening. You warn them about poor practices, which we'll talk about in the next slide. What are poor practices? You see if there is a scenario coming up, you record it, you respond to it. So when you have a child protection policy, this really creates this culture of awareness within the organization. Then also there's a huge discussion around prevention. Prevention is much more. It's like to prevent child abuses, to prevent intentional and unintentional harm happening at our skate projects. And child protection policy helps us to prevent and protect children from these intentional and unintentional harm. Then to also create a safe environment for children. So when we talk about child safe organization, the biggest element and the biggest component of it is that children are being empowered, children feel safe, and children are being listened to. Because if children will not have the confidence, if they will not be empowered, they will not see who to go to. They will never come to you. They will never talk to you about the abuses which are happening in the programs. They will never speak up against any adults which may potentially be involved in a poor practice, or being involved in an abuse. So I think what child protection policy provides us, it's also providing us a framework where children are being listened to, where they feel empowered as well. And also when we talked a lot to staff members, or to people who are engaged with a lot of children on ground, they also say that they also feel sometimes that they are scared that they can be accused of anything which they are not involved into. So child protection policy is not always about that there is an adult and he or she is abusing a child. It's also about giving this respect and empowerment to the staff itself as well. This is the child protection policy itself provide that framework that staff feel empowered and respected. So this is pretty much I touched upon the child protection. I wish that we were here, that we could have done some exercises around it, but because it's a 1 hour, so I just wanted to go through it quickly. But also the most important aspect is that we are between stage 1, I just talked about the structures. We are between stage 1 to stage 4, where we're talking about child protection to implementing our child protection policies. I will just emphasize that it is not an achievement to have a child protection policy. Achievement is when you implement that child protection policy. Achievement is that when you implement it according to the cultural needs, according to the cultural frameworks, according to the cultural understanding of people. So it's like many organizations could have child protection policy, but if you don't have staff training, if you don't have refresher training, if you don't, when you're recruiting people and you don't check on them, you don't ask for the police check certificates, and if you don't ask for the references, and if you don't ask right questions in the interview, it would be just a document somewhere lying in a shelf or in your computer somewhere on drive. So I think I emphasize this a lot. Ownership of this document is very important. There are a lot of laws, there are several laws out there, but the ownership of the document is pretty much important. So with this, I will jump onto the reporting and responding to CP issues. Yeah. So for example, like I mentioned it before starting my presentation slide, that many organizations really they wanted to report, but they don't know what is the whole process. And when I sent this survey, so I really found out that people are really they really highlighted this as a need. So I wanted to talk about a potential scenario, and then I will talk about what could we do and what could be poor practices of this scenario. For example, Rhiannon is coming in the morning in our skate park in Cambodia, and she is one of the educators, and she just came into the office, and one child stopped Rhiannon and told her that yesterday Imran, actually I will use myself, that Imran took her into his personal car, and they went to an ice cream place. They enjoyed ice cream. She really enjoyed it. Nothing happened. He dropped me at the house, and after the ice cream, we ate ice cream. We talked, and then he dropped us at my house. So a potential scenario, if you talk to many people will say no abuse has happened. So many people will just let it go, and maybe they will just talk to me that don't do this anymore. But I think this is somehow a poor practice which should not happen. So what if this child has come to me? What will I do? Step A is that I have a reporting form. So what I will show you the reporting form. This template is up on the Goodpush website, and Rhiannon will talk about it. So the first thing is that when the child has come to you and they have shared some concerns, so you have to fill this form. Without that is not your judgment that anyone who's like standing there and then they say, oh yes, I know Imran is doing that. I know he has been doing this before as well. And you don't have the authority at that time to say, oh, this is an abuse, oh, this is a poor practice. You don't have to do that, because that is not what is the role. So the first thing which we'll do is you will fill this incident form. You will write all the information. It's very self-explanatory. You will write all the information of what the child has told you in here, and you will send this to a responsible person. I don't know about the initiatives, how is the structures in your organizations, but I will just show you the reporting flow chart from Skatistan, that how we proceed with the cases. So when you fill up the reporting form, so the first thing is at Skatistan, what we do is we inform the general manager. Everyone is responsible to fill up the reporting form. We have trained all the staff members that how to fill this reporting form.
Volunteers.
Yeah, the volunteers, the staff members, the educators, everyone is trained on it. And what they do is, the first thing is in the reporting, when there is a concern, you fill up the concern reporting form and you inform the general manager. That is what is the criteria, what is the thing which you do, a must thing that you have to inform. If the general manager is not at the skate park, you should call them or text them, but you should inform them. And with this is the model for Skatistan. I don't know how is the structure within your skate parks or within your skate organization. What is the structure? So I think we can also share this reporting flow chart with you if it makes it easy for you. So you can also edit this and you can put your own responsible people into this thing. So now what will happen is that you fill this form and you send it to Child Protection Manager. And at Skatistan, I am the responsible person, so all the forms are coming to me. So when the forms are coming to me, I have a meeting with the general manager and we decide. We are 2-3 people, sometimes I, Rhiannon, or Talia, we are colleagues, we talk about it and we discuss the whole issue in detail, and then we talk about it. Either it's a poor practice or it's an abuse. We'll talk about the poor practice later on, and then and we'll talk about the abuse as well. And many of you may know abuse, but unfortunately we don't have time to talk about to go into details of abuse, but we'll just touch upon some of it. So if it is a poor practice, then it will go straight to the HR policy and the general manager. So the general manager within the country are responsible then. So then there is not a lot of hierarchy in it. So the general manager within the countries, they are responsible, and what they do is they decide in accordance to the HR policy that what action should be taken. Either they want to dismiss this person, either they wanted to ask him or her to live for a certain time until they feel they wanted to send them on training, whatsoever is the HR policy, and whatsoever the HR policy has the plenty for that abuse, for that poor practice, that will happen. But if it is an abuse and we all mutually agree on it, that would be the same would be in your skate projects. That if 2 or 3 of you sit down and say, okay, that's a potential abuse, and it could lead to an abuse, it is an abuse, or it has a potential to lead to an abuse. So what will you do? So at Skatistan, what we do is we have an emergency meeting of the directors and the general manager. So what they do is they decide the next step. If it's like severe cases, what we do is we involve the local authorities as well, like either police, either social security department, or anyone in the country, because in most countries there is no social security or there is no child department. So in accordance to what is available in the country, we go through that way. So then the general manager also, so then we give everything back to the general manager. They also inform the same employee that it was an abuse. And then they tell them the final action, what final actions were taken. Either they are being dismissed, or they're being sent away without salary, whatsoever the jury or the people or the directors what they decide. Then the general manager respond to them, and then we send it to our executive director, Oliver, and what he does is he informs our board. So when it's an abuse, we follow the whole process that everyone in the organization is aware of what has happened. And in both cases, what we also do is that we revise certain things. We see if there is a need of a training, if we see if we need to change media communication plan, we see if there is any internal communication problem, and we have to change that. So that is also according to your skate park, your skate project, that what you want to do at that time. Do you want to change something? What has to be changed? But you have to go revisit this. It's not that, okay, this was just one issue and we don't have to revisit. And that's what we do at Skatistan, that we revisit this whole thing. So I will just quickly go through what you have to do in a certain situation when the children are coming and telling you that are just sharing their concern to you. In most cases, please stay calm. Don't just say don't. Oh, how can it happen? No way. How it is happening? So I think what research also shows is that when the staff members are people who are listening to the concerns of the children, when they tell them, oh, I don't know how this happened. So it's the only thing which you can do is to stay calm. Don't put a lot of pressure on the young person. Don't blame them. Don't listen to them. The most important thing is listen to them and don't interrupt. Don't just finish their statements and say, and then you went to the ice cream and then you went to the petrol station. Don't finish. Just listen what the kids are telling you. So that's also very important. Also, be very calm. Don't be surprised. Don't just show shock. That, oh, I'm shocked. Oh, I don't know if Imran can do this. I don't know. Don't show these kind of signs. Take them serious. Research also shows that many kids don't feel empowered because they're not being taken serious. Also, tell the kid, in many cases, many children say that you don't have to tell this to anyone. You don't have to promise anything false to the children. You just have to tell them that this is no more a secret. I have to share it with 2-3 other people. That the child is knowing that there is a process that they have to follow. So you have to be very much accountable to the child as well. And then also acknowledge their confidence. Acknowledge that they did the right thing. This was the right thing to come to me, and this is how it should be. So just tell them, just encourage them, and also be aware of your non-verbal communication as well. Sometimes what people do is they're on their phones, they're listening to them, then say, yes, I'm listening to you, just talk to me. When a child is coming with a concern, please be 100% attentive to what the child is telling you and what the child is about to say. These are some of the things. There are more, but as I don't have a lot of time, so I will stop here. But I also wanted to talk about the child. This is when you're recording, but also what could be potential poor practices and what could be potential what is an abuse. So I will just quickly go through poor practices. Poor practices are hugging in front of the children, where in a culture which is not appropriate, are holding hands in a culture where it's not appropriate. So these are all poor practices. There are also other poor practices which Rhiannon will talk about. It's the physical safety part. But also there's a lot of poor practices is that you also staff member does certain things, but they ask the children not to do it. Like, for example, they just tell them that you don't have to eat on the skate park, but the teacher, the educator, they are eating themselves. So I think this is also poor practice. So you have to be a role model for the children. The children don't take you serious until and unless you do the same thing which you're educating for. So these are some of the poor practices. And next time when we have a webinar, I would really like to talk about the physical abuse, what are the signs, how to recognize it, how to be vigilant about it, also sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and neglect. These are also abuses which can occur at our skate park, but most of them are also coming from the communities themselves where we work, especially from Afghanistan, Cambodia, South Africa. There's a lot of issues which the kids bring from their communities to our skate parks, how to deal with it and how to talk about it. Thank you very much. I hand it over to Rhiannon.
Cool. So, yes, I wanted to talk specifically about things that come up within skate projects. So, like I said, I've worked at Skatistan, and I've been in all the different countries that we work in. I've also visited other social skate projects around the world, in South America, in the Middle East, and different places. And I think there's like a few common risk areas that happen because of the kinds of programs that we're doing and the way that we're usually running. Skate projects are often like pretty grassroots and DIY. So yeah, I'll just bring up a couple of these. And if you guys have any that come to mind, like risk areas or things that you've seen at skate projects, you can put it in the chat window so other people can see. So starting out, I think a basic one, which I guess you guys are all aware of, and it applies a lot to more like the physical safety of kids, is having a safe environment. So this is, you know, like the actual skate park, is it in good condition? Are the skateboards in good condition? Also, you know, if you're using a public space, what ability do you have to maybe control who else is there? Is it somewhere where the kids are not being maybe bothered by strangers and stuff like that? There's also, like Imran talked about, how maybe you have young people who are volunteering. Like we've had situations where in Afghanistan, like it's quite strict, the division of boys and girls, and if you have like young people of different genders that are working together, and if they're like going into like kind of hidden nooks together, this can be a problem, even if they're just like chatting or whatever. So having an open area where the kind of supervisors or main teachers can kind of have an overview on everything is really good. And then next risk area that comes to mind, this is a really big one, and I think for any project, staff and volunteers are a really big risk area, especially when you're talking about intentional harm, but also unintentional. So I think on the whole, like what Imran, all these examples he was talking about, a lot of it comes down to actually being prepared for the worst. So you make all these policies and you make, you know, reporting forms and reporting templates, you know, hoping that this kind of stuff won't happen and that you can actually set things up in a way to prevent that. But yeah, staff and volunteers can be a big risk. You know, there is always that chance that someone is trying to join an organization that works with children and do some kind of harm. And especially maybe smaller organizations, they might think that they can get away with it easier. Then you have I think a lot of skate projects have volunteers because generally skate projects are having low budgets, and it's a good way to be able to like keep going in a way without having to pay people. So I think because people are working with volunteers, there are often like lower expectations on them because you're so grateful that you have people that are committed. But I think it's really important to have certain standards and policies and to apply that like across the board, whether it's for full-time staff, part-time staff, paid staff, volunteers, whatever. And even if volunteers are coming in, I think usually they're coming in with the very best intentions, a lot of passion. If they don't have the necessary experience or awareness, they can be doing things unintentionally, like maybe favoritism of kids and, you know, maybe ignoring other kids or just not knowing how to respond if a kid is like really causing lots of problems. And that ties into the next risk area, which I think is kind of a lack of training and awareness of child protection related issues. So what comes to mind for me is that a lot of social skate projects work with really vulnerable communities, And in those cases, you have kids that have experienced abuse and they've experienced trauma. And if you have teachers, staff, volunteers who don't have that necessary training and awareness, they won't know how to deal with that. Like, I can say from my own experience, I went into that situation not knowing how to deal with that. So I think anything you can do to build that awareness is good. And sometimes it's like using resources like what we have on Goodpush. It's reaching out to other organizations in the community to see if they can be a mentor, or maybe they can even give some free trainings for your team, stuff like that. So the last kind of main risk area that I wanted to talk about here is media coverage, because I see at a lot of skate projects, social skate projects, they're really good at doing media stuff. So, every skate project has like Instagram and Facebook and is always posting photos and videos, and it's really inspiring. And I think skateboarding itself is really attractive to people, so you often probably have media wanting to request to come and do a story or do a video about you. And this is, I think, really awesome, but it's super important to be aware of potential risks associated with having media come. So if they're coming and there's not kind of any expectations set or anything, then you might end up in a situation where maybe your kids, your participants, are portrayed in a not so positive light, like have some kind of a stigmatizing thing affiliated with them. Also, if you have media interviewing, they might ask really personal questions that can actually be like kind of re-traumatizing to kids that have been through a lot. Also media might do interviews they might want to do it in a quiet place alone with a kid, and maybe they're not thinking anything bad, but this is just something that can happen if you're not aware and you're not kind of setting out, hey, we have certain guidelines or rules that you have to follow if you're coming. So those are just a few examples, I think, of common risk areas, and I wanted to then talk about recommendations. So as I said, if you have other ideas or things that you want to share with others in the webinar, just put it in the text chat window. But yeah, going into recommendations. So the first one I think is probably the most important, because I think this is the highest chance of risk, and Imran's talked about it a lot, is with staffing. And by staffing, I also include volunteers in that. I think it doesn't matter what role or if they're paid or not. I think that it's really important that there's kind of a standardized process for people that are coming in to help out at a skate project. So I think recruitment is a really crucial stage. So as Imran said, things like references, getting police checks is really great. Also asking questions about child protection in the interview stage. And we have actually like some example questions, which we can also share with you guys afterwards if you're interested in that. But yeah, that's a really crucial stage. And then obviously when someone comes on, having some kind of an agreement or code of conduct that they're signing, so that they know what's expected, and that you have a child protection policy, you enforce it, and they know that this is there. And then providing them with training. So a lot of us have come into what we're doing. Some of us have had a lot of background and experience and education on this before we got involved with social skate projects, and some of us haven't. So I think it's best to just provide everybody with a basic amount of child protection training, and to do this on an ongoing basis. And we want to keep providing tools through Goodpush to help you with doing this. Then the next kind of area for recommendations. So Imran talked a lot about having a child protection policy, and this is definitely like the most important first step. But if you actually look at the template that we have up on the Goodpush toolkit, I'll show it again in a second. There's a lot of supporting policies that are involved. So you mentioned HR policy, so that would tie into probably recruitment. It's kind of like it's an ongoing process, and you can always do better and better and better. I think start small with the child protection policy, but you'll find over time there's very important ones to have, and it ties into these risk areas. So like visitor and media policies, these are really good. And this is like basically, it could be something very simple, that you have any external visitors who are coming to see your program, including media, you have them sign it. That sets out some rules. So as an example, maybe for just general visitors who just want to come check it out, you say no photography, as a standard thing. Maybe for media, you say if they want to do any photography or video, they have to get consent first. And if any kid doesn't want to be in the pictures or video, they have to respect that. They have to ask the kids in their local language any interview questions. So in Afghanistan, in practice, this meant that they always had to bring a translator with them if they were coming from like BBC or something like that. So yeah, you can set those out, and what's really good about that is that then they know the expectations that you have, and it also helps your team, like your volunteers and your staff, because if the media are doing something annoying or they're doing something that's not appropriate, then you have something that you can like point to and say, hey, you signed this, and we have to like reinforce it, and if you don't, then you have to leave. So this is a really useful thing to have, and we have templates for both of these actually up on our toolkit. And yeah, the third kind of main area for recommendations is running sessions. So a lot of you have lots of experience, and I think you know most of these things, but I guess I'll just put it out there that one thing is, if you're having any kinds of programs, it's really good to have 2 or more staff or volunteers there on site. This is just helpful on the one level, because if a person is doing something wrong, whether it's an intentional harm or a poor practice, you have someone else on your team who can witness that and can report it if necessary, or stop it or whatever. But secondly, I mean, also it's just helpful if there's some kind of an injury or emergency. It's just on many levels very helpful to not have one person on their own. And related to that, it's useful to think about your like teacher and kid ratio for a skate class, especially. That ideally you don't have one teacher with 20 or 30 kids, but you have at least like one teacher for 10 kids or something, so they can help to like manage things and avoid like actual crashes and broken arms and stuff like that. Accidents. And related to that is like also organizing your sessions for different skate abilities. I'm sure most of you are doing this, but like just separating off like a beginner's area from a more advanced area. And this is like kind of a controversial one sometimes with social skate projects, but having safety gear and helmets on site is just a really kind of no-brainer and simple way to reduce actual like physical risk of getting injured for kids, especially beginners. And it has an advantage of really getting the parents and the community on board with your project. And what Imran talked about was also this thing about any of your staff being role models. So I think that is a really key point, is that anyone who's involved with you, it doesn't matter if they're a young volunteer, they should have some kind of basic code of conduct that they're following. And it can be things like no smoking in front of the kids during any programming. Like things like he said, like not bringing them, out of the car on their own without getting permission of the parents for whatever reason. Also, if you do have a safety gear rule, like modeling that behavior, so maybe not wearing the full set, but at least wearing a helmet to show like, hey, like we're advanced skateboarders, but we are still wearing a helmet. It's going to really help with getting the kids behind it. So that's going into kind of the specifics of social skateboarding that I thought could be interesting. And now we're kind of near the end of the webinar, and I wanted to talk about actual next steps and actions. So as Imran mentioned, we know you're all at like quite different stages in terms of child protection. So some of these will be applicable, and some, I think that they'll all be somewhat applicable to each of you. So the first thing I would say is that you could take our child protection quiz. So this is a new feature that we put on the Goodpush toolkit actually just today. So you'll be the first ones to do it, and I'll show you in a sec where to find it. It's like a fun quiz. It's not anything too extensive. It's just so you can, it's like doing any online quiz. It's not like some kind of a certification of this or that. It's just for fun. So I'll show you that. And then what I want to do now is just quickly go onto our toolkit page for child protection to show you a few of these different forms that we've been talking about, just so you know where to find them in case because it can be a bit confusing. So I'll just do that really quickly now. So I'll send the link. This is our child protection page. Some of you have probably seen it. I'll send the link to this in a follow-up email. But all of these different templates and examples that we have are found right at the bottom in our resources and templates section. The quiz I was talking about is just here. You just click this link. I'll also send that link directly in a follow-up email. But a few of the resources I wanted to highlight for you, which I think would be super useful for using within your projects, is, I'll just go through in order. The first one is a Goodpush Child Protection Quick Guide, which I actually sent you guys an email. It's about 4 pages. We'll see if this opens kind of fast. It's about 4 pages, and it gives an overview into child protection and policies. This could be something useful for, like, if your team is just starting to develop a child protection policy, or you want to like kind of build awareness, this could be a useful thing to share with your team. And then some other resources that are useful is our participant registration and waiver form. That's actually within our child protection template as well. I'll show you this. Let's just go into this. The child protection template, it's a bit overwhelming if you see it. It's a new thing that we just added. So we at Skatistan revised our child protection policy. That was Imran's big job in the last little while. And we just thought, well, maybe it's helpful to everyone else to see an example, and also you're free to use it and adapt it however you see fit. So what we've done is we've made pink the different places where you can like add in your organization or add in specific things, and we really encourage you to adjust it to your own context if you are creating a policy from scratch, or if you want to maybe just use some of the different parts to update your policy. So yeah, you'll see like pink things where you can put in your own specifics. I won't go through that in detail, but if you go through the policy, blah, 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 you then have people sign it. And then, yeah, as Imran said, we have the incident report form. That's a really good one for you to have on hand if you don't have one. And then the second annex that I think is quite useful, excuse the formatting, is the participant registration and waiver form. So this is a few things in one. But yeah, if you don't already have a nice registration form, this is a cool, template you could adapt. And as part of it, we also have like parent and guardian information. And this is where we have it all in one place to make it easy. So a kid joins, we register them, we have all this information filled out, and at the same time, the parents sign a waiver form, and they also sign a media consent form, whether they are okay with like pictures or photos or videos being released of their kid. So this is like in our own social media and externally, and this is just a really useful thing to get all at once. So yeah, I think those are useful things, and you'll see there's tons of other ones like the media agreement example and blah blah blah, volunteer agreement example. So if you don't have any of these, just check these out and you can use them as inspiration. And yeah, the final point here on this slide, I think for an action, it would be great if you don't have a child protection policy. If you want to make one, we really encourage you. And like I said, we have those resources up there for that purpose to help you with that. Also, if you already have one, like Imran said, it's always good to review it regularly, especially with, if you have a team of 2 or 3 people. I know most of you are operating either a one-man, one-woman show, or you only have a few people involved, then you can get people together and give input on it. And that'll also help them to like have an understanding of it and actually be using it and making it like a living thing and not just something that gets made and put somewhere. And something we'd like to do, we're going to work on it in the next little while, is prepare a few like training slides that you could use with, say you have volunteers joining or whatever, just to like give them an overview on child protection as an introduction as part of your child protection implementation. And I would also be really interested to like hear about your progress. So if you do end up creating or updating your child protection policy or using any of our templates, like please let me know, because that's super interesting for us to know that the resources are being used. And and if you have any suggestions to improve them. I might also do like a check-in after like a month with you guys to see where you're at. So we're pretty much, we just have a couple minutes here. So I would be curious, Imran and I will stay on for extra time if anyone wants to ask questions. So what we have is a comment here very early on from Susie at Bangladesh Street Kids Aid. Hey everyone, I was hoping the Goodpush team could touch on some safe practices when using public transport to get kids to the location. We don't have a vehicle to transport them ourselves, so we have to use public transport until we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always this question is also asked so much in our own community as well. I think I don't know what is in Bangladesh, but if you see, one of the tips could be, which I potentially see is coming from the region itself, is that when you see on the same route, there are different transportation. So if you see that 10 kids are coming from one community, so one van can bring them from their community to your place, which will be helpful, because when these vans are full, they really go, and they really go from one place to another place. So you see if that is one thing which is potentially helpful. You can have a volunteer or your educator who is coming from the same community where the kids are coming from. So they can also come with them in the local transportation. But it's always helpful if they're really coming from very far. You see if you can fundraise locally and have your own car, because if they're coming from scattered communities, then I think it's really, really important that you talk to the parents to drop them, because coming with a local transportation from far places, I don't know how far are the kids coming to your initiative, but I think it's important that an adult is always with the child, because it is a lot of risk, especially in South Asia when people are like going with the local transportation. So that could be one thing. But also I feel, especially from Bangladesh, I know a lot of stories, a lot of rickshaw drivers were volunteering themselves for good causes that they were bringing. So I think if you also can frame your initiatives out there, I think I'm sure there's some people who can volunteer themselves to bring the kids there. But I think I personally feel is talking to the parents and have much more strong community outreach.
Yeah, I think they have a hard time, because a lot of the Project Bangladesh Street Kids Aid, a lot of the kids are on their own in the streets. Their parents are involved and stuff. But I like this idea of trying to find maybe in each kind of area somehow an older kid who can kind of be a responsible volunteer to go with the kids to some kind of a central point. I think that's a good idea.
But I don't know how far are they coming from.
I don't know.
Yeah. So
we can talk to you more specifically about that at another time. And we also have another one from. Could you also suggest what to do with kids that do crazy stuff while participating in our programs, like climbing trees, riding on the back of cars, buses, rickshaws, climbing on top of high ledges, walls, buildings? I don't want to ban them from our programs because this is typical behavior for street kids in Bangladesh.
I completely relate to this one as well. I think we recently have a very good session on positive discipline. I think if you're interested, we can also talk about positive discipline. I think what this comes from is also like many kids are being pushed not to do certain things. So they really want to try certain things. And what we call is crazy, maybe it's really not crazy for them. But I think one way of like how we can positively talk to the kids, because I personally feel I come from the same region. There's a wide divide between the communication. There's a huge communication gap. Like kids are always, we don't talk to them. They're always being asked to do certain things. So I think positive discipline, which we are doing, and while I had done that in South Africa as well, that could be one helpful thing. And I think if you're really interested, we can have a separate session on that. Positive discipline.
Yeah, and we saw from Maputo Skate, I don't know who that is that was joining from there, I can't remember, but he wrote back that it's a big challenge for those kids. Normally, I try to have other activities that they like and ban them from that activity until he starts to change. Okay, I like this idea though of giving the kids that are kind of acting crazy other activities, and I think something that we've done definitely in Skatistan is we've almost purposely tried to engage the kids that are kind of the most out there ones, to give them responsibility during a session, a little bit more responsibility, so that they're like engaged and they feel like they are something to do. They're used to like getting attention or blah blah blah, and I think a lot of times they really react well if you give them some kind of responsibilities, whether it's like organizing the kids or cleaning up or distributing the skateboards or I don't know, things like that. So cool. And then we have from Zachary, this is really useful for me because so much of the child protection framework is common sense, but reminding us it needs to be consistently implemented and clearly defined is really helpful. Questions we have at this point are mostly about how a robust child protection policy impacts our insurance requirements and about insurance in general. I'll definitely be using the template to write a specific policy. Cool. Yeah, don't know so much about insurance in the US.
I was working with the US-based organization, so we had the insurance for with the. It's really expensive, and our programs were like for a longer period. I don't know how long the kids are coming to you. I don't have the specific details of that insurance, but I can really reach out to some of my colleagues who have who have been insuring these kids, not only from the US but from across the globe, because we were bringing a lot of kids to the US as well. So we were doing international insurance as well as the insurance of the place and also the insurance of the kids who were in our program.
And maybe, I think maybe Tony Hawk Foundation is based in the US, and they might, because they work with so many different skate parks, and some of them have programs around the US. It might be worth Zach reaching out to Tony Hawk Foundation to ask about this question. And they also are keen to like offer advice and stuff. So I think if you contact them, they would give you.
And I think, like Rhiannon said, I don't have a lot of idea about insurances in the US, but I think it's always good because US is one of the countries which I know that they're really keen on having insurance.
And something we didn't mention so far in this child protection webinar is that in general having a child protection policy, it's not a reason to have one, but it's very helpful in terms of meeting donor requirements. So you will, if you're applying for funds from different foundations or governments, you will probably realize that a lot of them are expecting that you have some kind of child protection policy and also other policies, like you might ask for an HR one or whatever. They'll be looking for this, so it will definitely be helpful in that regard as well.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope that it was interesting for you.
It was great talking to all of you. Yeah. I hope we'll be in touch.
Cool. Bye.